Someone didn't text back. A friend left you out. A job application came back as a no. Someone you cared about told you, in words or in silence, that you were not what they wanted. And it hurt. Not metaphorically. Not as a figure of speech. It hurt in the way that physical things hurt, a dull ache, a tightening in the chest, a sensation that occupied your body the way pain does, that made it difficult to think about anything else, that lingered in a way you could not simply decide to stop. You might have told yourself to toughen up. To be rational. To remember that it was just an email, just a silence, just a social slight that shouldn't register as anything serious in a person who has their life together. But your brain never got that message. Because to your brain, being rejected and being physically hurt are not two different kinds of experience. They are, in a very real sense, the same kind of experience. And understanding why changes everything about how you relate to rejection, to yourself, and to the people who have the power to make you feel this way. The foundational discovery here came from neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA. She designed an experiment using a simple online ball-tossing game called Cyberball. Participants were placed in a brain scanner and told they were playing with two other players online. For a while, the ball was passed among all three. Then, without explanation, the other two players stopped including the participant. They simply stopped throwing them the ball. What happened in the brain during this social exclusion was striking. The regions that activated were the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, the same regions that process physical pain. Not similar regions. The same regions. The brain, confronted with social rejection, responded in the same way it responds to being physically hurt. And the degree of activation in these pain regions correlated with how distressed the participants reported feeling. The more rejected they felt, the more their pain circuitry fired. This was not a metaphor confirmed by science. It was a mechanism revealed by science. The social pain of rejection and the physical pain of injury share neural real estate. They are processed by the same hardware. But why? Why would a brain that needs to manage physical survival also route social rejection through the pain system? The answer, as with so many things about the human brain, lies in what your ancestors needed to survive. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, social rejection was not merely unpleasant. It was potentially fatal. A human expelled from the group, from the tribe, from the community, from the network of people who shared food, protected each other, and cared for the young, faced a dramatically reduced chance of surviving the night. The social bond was not a luxury. It was a survival mechanism. And so your brain evolved a system to make sure you took threats to that bond with the same urgency it reserved for threats to your physical body. Pain works as a signal because it is impossible to ignore. You cannot rationalize away a broken arm. You cannot decide to feel fine about a severe burn. The signal is designed to override other processing and demand immediate attention and corrective action. By routing social rejection through the same system, evolution ensured that threats to your social standing would be treated with the same seriousness, that you would not casually accept exclusion from the group the way you might casually ignore a mildly interesting piece of information. The pain of rejection was your ancestors' motivation to repair social bonds, to seek reconnection, to adjust behavior, to do whatever was necessary to get back into the group. It was a feature, not a flaw. Psychologist Kipling Williams at Purdue University has spent decades studying what he calls ostracism, the experience of being ignored or excluded, and his research reveals just how powerful and indiscriminate this system is. In studies where participants were excluded even by a computer they knew was just running a program, even when told explicitly that the exclusion meant nothing, even when they knew the study was designed to make them feel excluded, they still felt rejected. The cognitive knowledge that the exclusion was meaningless did not prevent the pain system from firing. Your brain does not wait for an intellectual assessment of whether the rejection was warranted before it decides to hurt you. It hurts first. Then you catch up. Williams also found that even very brief experiences of ostracism, as little as a few minutes of being ignored, produced measurable drops in 4 fundamental needs: belonging, self-esteem, meaningful existence, and control. Not just one need, but all 4, simultaneously, from a brief game with a computer. This gives you a sense of how deeply wired the response is, and how little it takes to trigger it. But it goes further. Researcher Ethan Kross, who studies the overlap between social and physical pain, found something particularly striking. When people were asked to look at photographs of former romantic partners who had rejected them, the brain regions activated were the same as those activated during physical pain. Not the regions associated with emotional distress or sadness or cognitive processing of a memory. The actual physical pain circuitry. Looking at a photograph of someone who had left them. Kross also found that common pain medications, acetaminophen, better known as paracetamol or Tylenol, reduced the intensity of social pain in the same way they reduce physical pain. Participants who took acetaminophen daily for 3 weeks reported significantly fewer hurt feelings in daily reports than those taking a placebo. The drug that eases your headache also, to some degree, eases your heartache. Because at the neural level, they are the same thing. This research has implications that extend in every direction. It means that when someone tells you to stop being so sensitive about rejection, they are, in a physiological sense, asking you to stop feeling pain. The experience is not weakness or oversensitivity. It is a deeply ancient, deeply wired response that you share with every human who has ever lived, because every human who has ever lived needed their tribe to survive. It also means that chronic social rejection, being repeatedly excluded, marginalized, or isolated, is not just emotionally difficult. It is physically stressful in a measurable, biological sense. The same stress pathways activated by chronic physical pain are activated by chronic social pain. This is why isolation and loneliness have been repeatedly linked to measurable health outcomes: elevated inflammation, impaired immune function, disrupted sleep, increased cardiovascular risk. The body does not distinguish between these kinds of pain when it comes to the long-term cost. And it means something else, something quieter and perhaps more immediately useful. The next time you feel the specific, disproportionate ache of being left out, dismissed, or unwanted, the next time your nervous system responds to a read receipt and no reply as though something genuinely threatening has occurred, you are not being irrational. You are running a program that is millions of years old. A program that kept your ancestors alive by ensuring they never took their connection to others casually. You cannot simply think your way out of it. The signal is too old and too deep for that. But you can know what it is. And knowing what something is, understanding why your nervous system responds the way it does, recognizing the ancient logic behind a feeling that seems disproportionate to the situation, is not the same as eliminating the pain. But it is the beginning of not being destroyed by it.